hours do you stay in the
Thank you all so much for coming and joining us this evening. This is the second episode of the Moore Family Center for Whole Grain Foods, Nutrition, and Preventive Health's Food as Medicine seminar series. Our first one was on dairy about a month ago, and we transitioned into a very natural topic with the rise in awareness from the government shutdown. The Food as Medicine series is the center's flagship educational program, taking a systems approach to food, nutrition, and health topics. I'm Adam. I'm the outreach program at the center, and I'll be moderating the panel today. We are joined by experts bringing a unique blend of specialization in food insecurity to discuss the current state of this growing issue. The flyer that many of you were handed as you walked in today, and then is also available to those who are joining us virtually in the chat box. Overviews Lynn Benton Food Share's active fundraiser, plus there's a QR link to the Moore Family Center's website and our survey. Please, if you could complete the survey to help us bring better and better educational opportunities, that would be phenomenal. We are promoting Lynn Benton Food Share's fundraiser alongside this seminar. However, per library policy, we are restricted of any currency exchange, regardless of whether it's over the phone or in person. So I implore you to donate to Lynn Benton Food Share's fundraiser, but please wait until you are out of the building. We have to leave the space at 7 o'clock. So we have a pretty prompt end at 6:40. So then we can all wrap up and head on home. We're going to start here with some opening remarks from all of our panelists. And then I have a few discussion questions pre-prepared to get us going. And then we'll open this floor to all of you and everybody on the live stream as well to submit some questions to our panelists. So now I'm going to let Tina, Diego, Ryan, Jenny, and Mark introduce themselves and share a few remarks about the state of food insecurity. Thank you all very much for being here this evening. Yeah, I'll leave it to you, Tina.
Hi, so I'm Tina Dodge. I am with Extension Service in the Western Region Family Community Health Program. And I would say my expertise is based on just being present for over 21 years in the community. I was hired because I was bilingual to be a SNAP Ed educator. And the tie to food security is, as a nutrition educator, it's not very fun when your audience does not have food resources. So I got really involved in understanding food security and all the influences.
Thanks. Thanks, Adam, for having us. My name is Diego Nieto. I work for the Lynn County Health Department across the river in Albany. And I end up telling people my job description pretty often, which feels maybe strange, but I think it's worth noting. The first sentence of my job description is to promote policy, systems, and environmental changes around food systems and food access, which is to say that I'm not, like a lot of other people at the health department, meeting people's immediate needs or trying to address the kind of like immediate experience of food insecurity, but rather attending to the health of our entire food system and trying to help get our food system to a place where it can meet people's needs in a more consistent way. And I think that is, I think we need more people doing systems level work. I think oftentimes we individualize our problems and our solutions a lot. And yeah, a lot of my job is, I'm not, start what Adam said, I'm not really an expert. I'm not an expert in healthcare. I'm not an expert in agriculture. I'm not an expert in nutrition, certainly. But a lot of, all those experts end up shaping our food system in a variety of ways and aren't always talking to each other. So a lot of my job is convening people that are a part of our food system and trying to figure out how to make the system as a whole more resilient. So Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. My name's Ryan McCambridge. I'm the director of Lynn Benton Food Share. I've been there for 28 years. I started out as a part-time warehouse person, so Lynn Benton Food Share does have expertise. It's about getting food from point A to point B. We absolutely know how to do that. Oftentimes, I think that that's the sole purpose of human existence. You just move stuff around. But anyway, related to that, so in those 28 years, certainly seen how the concept of food insecurity has changed in 28 years. It was a relatively new concept 28 years ago, and now it's become much more known in terms of the policy implications of food insecurity and hunger. Myself and food banks, there is a split in systems work versus individual immediate needs. It's what we do well is those immediate needs, but there is some potential for advocacy and understanding better why people are coming to the food pantries. It's always a question in a nonprofit organization where resources are limited, how much you put into either of those buckets. And I'm sure we'll get into that discussion today. So thank you for having me.
Hi, I am Jenny Jackson. I'm faculty in the nutrition program in the College of Health at OSU. Also a registered dietitian nutritionist. My intersection with food insecurity, I teach college students, so I've seen both hungry and food insecure students and the effects of how that shows up in the classroom and in their lives. And in my research related to food insecurity has looked at the lifespan from kiddos to older adults, but more recently focused on college students and trying to understand what food insecurity looks like in that population, which relevant to other populations has been somewhat understudied and more recently found to really experience food insecurity at high rates. So interested in understanding those underlying factors, how we measure food insecurity among college students, and then what to do about that. I'm also working on a project with Oregon Double Up Food Bucks program, which is related to the SNAP program. So individuals in Oregon who receive SNAP benefits can get double the produce benefits at Oregon participating farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and grocery stores. So we're looking at evaluating data from those programs. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, Adam.
Good evening. My name is Mark Edwards. I'm a sociology professor in the School of Public Policy here at OSU, and I direct the OSU Policy Analysis Lab. I've been studying food insecurity in the state of Oregon and around the country for the last 25 or 30 years, probably about when it started to become something people studied. And one of the things that I think is true is that this has been a challenge facing our state for a long time. There have been periods of time when there has been more and other times less. We could talk some today about why those trends happen as they do. Sometimes they happen, though, I'll say, for reasons we can't control. We can't control when a recession happens, perhaps, or when a pandemic hits us. But then there are other times that we can have an impact on it, and whether that's through policy and impacting things like accessibility to SNAP or policies related to having housing be affordable and things like that. There are political choices we can make. And actually, Ryan here made a comment some years ago at one of our big conferences about food security when he talked about how it's a political choice. And that really has stuck with me over the years, that there are choices we make that make this a bigger or lesser problem. But also, it's a community choice about how we respond in terms of the ways that we give and share. And so that's something we'll get a chance to talk about tonight as well.
Thank you all very, very much for being here and also the work that you do. It's very inspiring to someone like me. So to begin, First question to discuss among you all. What do you identify as the primary structural and systemic drivers of food insecurity? Don't fight over the microphone.
Well, I just gave I gave a hint. One that I think is really important is housing. We've been thinking about that for a long time. Now everybody's thinking about it. It's on the lips of people all over the country, and our governor and legislators are talking about how we can address this. But we've known for a long time that the burden on people of paying for housing can really be an important influence on whether they experience food insecurity. People choose to pay the landlord before they buy everything they think they might need to put on the table. And so there's good research that has shown that the fraction of the population that is rent burdened has a significant impact on the rate of food insecurity when you compare state to state to state. And so, so I'd say that's one of the real, I don't know if I'd say it's the one, but it is an important one that these are connected, what's happening with housing and what's happening with food security.
I'll just add, so food security from a food banking perspective, why people are coming in, it's because of housing, healthcare, and education. Those opportunities right there. Food is one of the areas where there's no bill collector. Like, you can skip meals, but you can't skip your rent payment without being evicted. And that has been true for the last 28 years. It continues to be true now. The housing issue is more acute now than it was 28 years ago by far. And that's why the people coming into the emergency food bank system, there's more people and there's also higher frequency. So in the past, a family might come in once every 4 months, and now it's every month. And that has been a real change in the food banking world.
Yeah, I think, Mark, you gave another hint at what I was thinking in your first answer about like hunger and food insecurity being a political choice. I think that to zoom way out, I think that the primary driver of food insecurity is a political system that prioritizes profit over meeting people's basic needs, and a food system that prioritizes profit over meeting people's basic needs. I feel like when we talk about food deserts, that's a concept that a lot of us are familiar with, right? And it almost seems, understandable that in a place like in my county, Central Lynn, Brownsville, Halsey area, there aren't many people that live there. Doesn't really make sense for there to be a store there or an access point there. Ultimately, what we're doing then, if we take that for granted, is deciding, or is leaving it in the hands of a grocery corporation who is deciding whether they can make money or not, whether there is access in that given community. And then, people like Ryan, and organizations like Ryan's and our health department, and people have to kind of try to fill the gaps and catch people who fall through the cracks. But if you think about that a little further, in Central Lynn, for example, there's a ton of food produced. There are a lot of farmers who are trying to find places in markets to sell their food, and often having to send their food to Portland or other places to make a living. So there's all sorts of other ways we could organize and prioritize our distribution. But certainly, I think we often think about, when we talk about food security, we assume scarcity. And when we talk about the way we produce food, we talk about growing populations and how are we going to feed everyone. We've had more, I think by UN estimates, we produce 150% roughly of the food that all of humans need any given year. A lot of that is wasted, of course, which is a whole separate issue, but it's really not an issue of scarcity. It's an issue of priorities and distribution. So yeah.
I would just say there's a reason why across the region our community health improvement plans all say the same. Housing access, healthcare access, IDARE, which is really thinking about systemic racial discrimination, and then substance abuse, mental health. And so I think those are all very contributing factors towards food insecurity within our community.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add to that question before we move on? Okay. Going a little bit less macro, which populations experience the highest burden of food insecurity, and what factors make them particularly vulnerable?
You got the microphone?
Yeah, I think all of us can answer these. So we know older adults, adults with disabilities, children, immigrant families. I will say the anti-immigrant rhetoric right now in our communities is very concerning at the national level. It affects us at the local level. And so families are very nervous. Mixed status families, undocumented families are very nervous, right? And so that limits their movement within the community, and it affects, talk about mental health and ongoing trauma of these families. It's heartbreaking.
Go ahead.
I'll somewhat related to this, a little off topic, but so since Food Share was established, the idea behind it is everybody eats. You might see it on our flyer. The concept being that if you're a human being, you deserve dignity and respect, and we're going to make sure that you have something on the table. So during the discussions about eligibility for certain benefits or the immigration debate, Food Share has always been, if you're a human being, you will be served by our pantry network. You deserve that respect. That's been the case for 20 years ago, and it continues to be the case now. What the rhetoric has proved is that we're creating innovative solutions to making sure people get fed among certain populations, for sure. Other related to what populations, elderly, isolated, rural, that is a major component of our service area and program that we provide to folks. USDA does provide some funding for what's called the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. We have a caseload of about 450 people every month that we provide food to, about 35 pounds worth of product that is crucial to them having a nutritious diet. But related to that program, we see people in their homes. We deliver that product. So we really get a sense of the food is a major component of the service, but so too is just having 15 minutes to spend with these folks that are so isolated. They really look forward to it, and it allows us to then sort of check up on them each month to make sure that they're doing okay. And it improves their life just having that interaction.
So I think excuse me, to go back to the first question just briefly, what wasn't explicitly said, but what underlies all the factors everyone talked about is income, right? So low income is the #1 driver of food insecurity. So when we think about college students, many of them are low income. The estimates across the U.S. are variable depending on lots of measurement issues, anywhere from 10 to up to 75% of college students food insecure. The last time that Mark and I measured it here at OSU, we found roughly, anywhere from, we had a lower estimate and a higher estimate. So 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 college students at OSU experiencing food insecurity. So low income, first gen students, gender is there, both females as it is in the general population, as well as non-binary students, students of color, international students. It can depend based on meal plan participation, financial aid status, living situation. So lots of different factors affecting whether college students are able to get enough food to eat.
And I would also add, going back to the idea of older folks, a book plug, not mine, by Colleen Heflin has just come out called Food for Thought. It's a study of senior food insecurity, and in a presentation that she made recently to the Hunger Task Force, she told us, a thing to watch for now is as the baby boomers are all moving through, this is going to be the fastest growing group of people that are food insecure, even though their actual rate measured by the USDA is lower than it is for other groups. And we think actually the lower is because they don't always tell the truth. If you've had this experience with your grandparents who will say, no, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. When we survey older folks, sometimes they tend to minimize what really is their situation. But even with that lower measure, they as a group are demographically going to represent a larger fraction. And so I'm guessing that what Ryan is seeing here is really the front edge of that, they call the silver tsunami of the baby boomers, coming through this stage of life. They're going to be coming through food pantries too. So I think this will be a thing to think about in terms of the future of addressing food insecurity and the kinds of innovative approaches like Ryan has started to describe here.
I would just add really quick, I think you mentioned children, kids, there's a reason they call them dependents, right? They depend on us to feed them in a lot of cases, and I think whenever I think that we've seen that a lot of families depend on school lunches, for example, for food access, and a lot of families struggle a lot more in the summer when school isn't in session to meet those needs. So I think that from the data that I've seen, the food insecurity rate among children is always a little higher than the general food insecurity rate in Oregon, so that's significant.
I am going to switch the question I was going to ask, especially being that Mark outlined the silver wave that you referred to, the silver tsunami. We know that food insecurity is on the rise, especially since COVID. So to elaborate, what are the key reasons food insecurity has been worsening in recent years despite existing programs and policies that are in place?
Yeah, I think that I know that I've talked to Ryan about this, and I'm sure he has a better explanation of the particulars of this history. But definitely there was a dip in food security in some measures, like coming out of COVID and during and coming out of COVID because of a bunch of assistance programs. And then I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think things got worse than they were pre-COVID after a lot of those programs ended, which I think I would chalk up to, first and foremost, the cost of everything increasing. I think we've talked about the kind of relationship between all of these parts of our cost of living, and yeah, if everything else is more expensive, it's going to be that much harder. Food included. It's going to be that much harder to obviously put food on the table. So
I'll just add, COVID experience was pretty fascinating from a food banking perspective. So just very quickly, when March of 2020, where things started shutting down, there was huge panic. The food pantries were inundated with requests for food. Then as both state and federal government started to respond through various assistance programs, the number of people seeking assistance declined dramatically. It was almost as if we found a solution to hunger in COVID because of all of these assistance programs. And then that followed through till, 2023, 2024, started emerging out of COVID, and but then more people, as those assistance programs started to fall off, more people started showing up at the food bank again. And then you had the inflationary pressure on housing and food. And those basic needs, inflationary pressures, is what has led to this back at the same levels, if not more, than where we were prior to COVID. And now we certainly are seeing trend lines where the food pantry numbers are going to be at or above where they're at now, because there's no silver lining. There's not, like, we're not in a recession, and yet we're still at these high numbers of people seeking assistance. And that's probably the scariest thing, is the economy is actually pretty good in some ways, and yet we still are seeing such high numbers of people seeking assistance.
Okay, thank you. Then I know that Jenny will have something to comment on this question. In what ways does food insecurity function as a determinant of health, and what health outcomes are most strongly affected?
Well, I would say that it is a social determinant of health. Access to food, ability to eat, it's one of our basic needs to live and survive. So are you asking about outcomes among college students or just in general?
Either or, however you want to respond to that.
Health outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see, obviously, malnutrition is a problem when you're not getting enough food or nutrition. Higher rates of mental health problems, depression, anxiety. Specifically among college students, we see more disordered eating behaviors. Help me out here. I'm trying to think. I did make some notes. Let me make sure I didn't miss any of the big things I wanted to say about that. Poor physical activity habits, along with a dietary quality. And then one I do want to mention, because it would be for younger kids as well as college students, is academic performance. So we can definitely see that in hungry kiddos. So, anything?
I would just add, too, that when we measure food insecurity with sort of the official measures that we've used for many years, that a couple of the questions actually are about the psychological and emotional experience of food insecurity. It's not just about what did you eat or what kind of decisions did you have to make sure you had enough. There are questions about anxiety, and so it strikes me, because that's a big part of the suffering, is when you're coming up to the halfway point in the month and realizing we're not going to make it to the end of the month, or the shame that comes with having to ask for help for some folks, or the sense of I'm unable to be the kind of parent I thought I was going to be to make sure my kid had enough. So I think that recognizing the impacts there on the mental health side and the emotional health is probably an underappreciated aspect of the whole experience.
Yeah, and I would say, going back to the older adults as well, a lot of data to support food security related to older adults being able to live independently and maintain activities of daily living. So when, if we think about wanting to support older adults in remaining independent as long as possible, having enough food to eat is definitely a factor in their ability to live alone, and the psychological piece comes in there as well. If there's not enough food to eat, it's just a basic need.
I'll say quickly, I think it gets really dicey, especially from a population public health level, to try to tell people what healthy eating is specifically. A lot of things, there are a lot of factors that go into it, and people's bodies are very different. What I have tried to really center in my work is, you know, I mean, just I think we've talked on touched on isolation as well. Is the cooking? I think that if you are cooking for yourself to whatever extent that's feasible, that is going to lead to generally better health outcomes. I think we've seen, it's like, I don't know the exact data, but ultra processed food is just so much more common over the last 100 years. So I think just, you know, empowering people, educating people, and sharing with others to combat that isolation can really help with those kind of long-term, not only nutrition outcomes, but mental health and, you know, kind of just like general fulfillment outcomes as well.
I'll just add anecdotally, because it's one of my favorite stories. Part of food banking is also creating opportunities for folks. So because food is so expensive, if you're a parent, you don't want to waste money on food that your kids aren't going to eat. So as a result, you're not going to be very adventurous if you have picky eaters. So where the food bank can play a role is introducing foods at the food pantry level to be available where the family might not otherwise purchase that item. One happened to be with OSU Extension when you were doing a tasting demo at South Corvallis Food Pantry, and I think it was like a cucumber pancake or something like this. It was odd sounding, but but because they had the demo, the preparation, and all the ingredients that went into it, the family came in with their kids, they tasted it, and they said, we love this. They got all those items, and that made a difference in now how that family approaches food and cooking. So those are some of the things in which it might not be systemic, but it made a difference to that family substantially, and probably had a legacy to it as well. So that was, I just really like that story. So anyway.
You just reminded me of a story. I have seen so many of these hilarious and awesome moments through tastings. My favorite one, I think, was I was at a school doing a tasting table. We just set up at the cafeteria and have like some, I think we had a spinach salad that had like cranberries and carrots, and it had adult spinach in it, not baby spinach. I haven't really seen adult spinach that much. And the kids had no idea what it was. And so I was like, people were like, the kids were walking up to me and being like, what you know, as we were offering them this salad. And I was like, it's because we had chopped it up. So I was like, it's spinach, look. And I like showed them one of the whole leaves, and they were just like amazed by this spinach leaf. And I was like, here, take one and like eat it. And they were like, this one kid took a spinach leaf and was like kind of munching on it and really excited. And then there was this like wave of like all these other kids around them, around this one kid, seeing this one kid with a huge spinach leaf. And all of a sudden, everyone came back to the table and just wanted like the individual spinach leaf. And there was like 30 kids around me with like huge spinach leaves and like munching on it and just like so excited. And obviously, you'd be hard pressed to get a kid excited about any vegetable, you know, in other circumstances. But that was so cool, and it was, you know, I did not expect that at all. And yeah, who knows like what that would lead to throughout those kids' life about as they approach, you know, spinach. So yeah. Anyway.
I just want to say sometimes I struggle because we in Extension, we do a lot of individual level nutrition education and always wanting to influence, right, the higher levels of policy, systems, and environmental strategies. But creating that welcoming environment at those pantries and opening people to taste different things through our Food Hero recipes that meet dietary guidelines, there are lots of stories. And I just want to say there is some controversy around food security versus nutrition security, right? Because some want to ensure that everyone has the nutrition they need as through every age and stage they are going through, right? And some people just want to ensure that people have the food and they can make their own food choices based on what they have access to. But we know the more families cook, the better nutrition they're going to have at home, right? So the more we can encourage that and support that in our communities, the better. And as someone who has primarily worked with immigrant families throughout my profession, I would say I'm trying to maintain those cultural protective factors that immigrant families naturally come into the United States with. They already come with health, they're cooking at home. They're using what's in season, right? They make that a priority for their family. And so for my job, I'm trying to, right, make sure that lasts through their children and their grandchildren, because we know health outcomes, right? My grandchildren versus my friends' grandchildren will have different health outcomes.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the last pre-planned discussion question, and I have a request. Clay, if you could message me on Teams some of the questions from the chat, that'd be phenomenal. So what can we do about it as a community? An enormous theme tonight is empathy and looking after one another. And as good-willed as somebody can be, it helps to have some actionable items. You may not have a profession in food insecurity, but what are ways, you all do, but what are ways our community members can get involved and address the issue together?
I just want to flag an initiative before I pass it to Ryan, because he knows. We are trying an initiative with Master Gardeners, OSU Extension Master Gardeners, and Lynn Benton Food Share for everyone to grow a row, right? So working primarily with the Latino families, we know that food security, they need, and it's food access is an issue, and affordability of fresh local foods. So trying to think of a way of trying to get local fresh foods into the emergency food system. So if you are a home gardener, please plant an extra row, or donate non-perishable food items or fresh produce to the local food bank and gleaners and meal sites.
So I am a child of the 70s. In the 1970s, Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, was on PBS, I think every day. I don't know. I just remember it being on all the time. And so when people ask me what that is, I don't get too specific. I say, be kind to one another. Just show kindness throughout your day. Now, there's specific things that you can do around food insecurity. It could be grow a row, it could be volunteer, it could be donate to the local pantry or Lynn Benton Food Share. But in the end, live your life in a kind way, and you'll find a way that you're contributing to the overall health of the community. But if you do want specifics, yes. Lynn Benton Food Share is a conduit in which you can benefit over 68 agencies throughout the 2-county area. One of the biggest needs by far is volunteers, though. So I'm not saying that our food system and our responses is a great way to respond to food insecurity. Having a volunteer, nonprofit, charitable network that is taking more and more of the responsibility of feeding the community versus federal government is not an ideal state, but that's where we're at. But over and above, what that volunteer network needs is more people committed to it. And it's what we've seen is that volunteering has changed as generations have changed. So in the past, volunteers would come in and they would be dedicated once a week, twice a week. They'd always be there. And now that volunteerism has changed to, well, they'll volunteer an hour, maybe once a year. And that has changed how the food pantries can maintain themselves. And the volunteers are getting older and they're getting burned out. And how we're going to continue to deliver the services that the communities that we serve have become dependent on is a real question going forward. So we have the ability, and if you're interested in volunteering, absolutely contact Lynn Benton Food Share. We can put you in the right direction. So.
I love that, Mr. Rogers, and focusing on empathy. Yes, so yes to that. I think supporting local food systems, local farmers markets, CSAs. I think if you're interested in influencing policy, what's happening around SNAP benefits and measuring of food insecurity in the United States, a really easy thing you can do if you want to send some thumbs up to your Congress people is you can join the Food Research and Action Center. It's frac.org. And they have an action alert center where you can just go on there and see what types of things are being proposed in Congress or what they're asking you to contact your legislators about. They will provide a template letter, and you simply put in your information and hit send, and it will go to your Congress people to get them to vote in areas that will support food security. Another thing I was thinking about, I'm going to look directly at Dave, who is our director of the Moore Family Center. I think it would be great if we could have either an outreach program or a course on campus on food literacy, right? And so helping students, college students, who oftentimes come into college already from food insecure families and continue to be food insecure while they're in college. And so what does that look like when they leave college? So I'm thinking food literacy, where we have a class that teaches basic cooking skills as well as some nutrition, basic nutrition, meal planning, budgeting, food budgeting, those sorts of skills so that they can leave OSU and better care for themselves and their families as they move through lifespan.
This is a little less tangible, but I would say two things. One would be to listen well and better to the circumstances that people are in. People don't often want to talk about their own food insecure situation. So don't assume that people are doing fine. Listen well. And then I would say speak well in terms of, as you learn about these things, to talk with the people around you who might disagree with you about this. I think about what happens at Thanksgiving dinner tables, right? When somebody says something that's uninformed, because of civility, we don't say anything, right? So I'm not asking you to disrupt this week's dinners. But as you have opportunity to listen well there and share what you're learning, that is a way that we broaden community empathy, awareness, participation, that sort of thing. So I think there are pretty simple ways within our little networks. Unless we only hang out with people that completely agree with us on everything, then maybe that doesn't make much difference. But I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
Yeah, I echo everything everyone else has said for sure. Especially, I think that just like showing up with kindness and empathy, maybe with, like some home-cooked soup or something. I think genuinely like cooking for other people and just feeding, the people around you and yourself is a big part of this that we don't often focus on a lot. That's like a huge part of our food system, is just people feeding and taking care of others. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that, which we often kind of separate out from this discussion, is labor considerations. And the same immigrant populations that we've established are oftentimes at risk of food insecurity are in many cases the ones who are producing our food. Add food insecurity to the list of. I was at an epidemiology conference in my public health world conference in May, and they had like this list of epidemiological risks that farm workers are disproportionately at risk of. And so, yeah, I mean, like advocating for farm workers, supporting farm workers wherever you can, supporting farms that actually support their workers, I think is a big part of our food system that we often just like, oh, that's labor, you know, over there. But it's all connected, of course. So.
Does anybody else want to respond to that? Are we good? Okay. If anybody has a question in the audience, there is room microphones. So if you could just ask our panel aloud and pronunciate, that would be fantastic. And I saw Clara's hand go up first. Do you have a question, Clara? A food insecurity champion among us on OSU's campus, I may add.
So, Mark and Jenny, how in your research do you define food insecurity? And then how does that definition compare to policy, like when eligibility, like when you're eligible for SNAP? Do those align?
Published a paper on this. All right. So we start first with the same measures that the USDA uses. All right, so which is a series of questions. We don't just say to people, "Are you food insecure?" People won't know what even that means. So we ask a battery of questions like, "Okay, in the last year, did you do this? Did you have to do this, et cetera?" And then if they get to a certain number of those where they say yes, we say, "Okay, they were food insecure," whether they called themselves that or not. All right, so there's a developed measure that we use there, but Jenny and others have been also experimenting with how might we modify what we ask, because the original measures were made for households, for families, and so when you ask an individual college student, you know, did you and your household do X, Y, and Z? They're thinking, well, I don't know. There's 4 of us. We all use the same fridge. Each has our own shelf. I don't know what they're doing, right? And so the idea has been to keep experimenting with that, but with those different measures. But so I would say in terms of the definition, we pretty much stick with what the kind of the general definition about this being sort of this challenge of being able to provide for yourself in a regular way, the kinds of foods that you know, are healthy for you in a consistent way, in a way that is, I'll say, socially acceptable. You know, grabbing leftovers off somebody else's plate in the dining hall is not an acceptable way. So we try to get at those things, and have also been experimenting with some how we ask those questions of college students themselves.
That answers your question.
Did
I guess then also the general public. How do you measure outside of college students?
Right. So among the general public, so for like the data that is collected is, well, I should say, here we go. I'll have to parenthetically, yeah, until about 2 months ago, there was built into place that every December, a big national survey is done through the current population survey that used this really validated approach with all these indicators that would allow us to very precisely measure if people were food insecure or not. The USDA announced a month or so back that they're going to quit collecting this data. So the last bit of data collected on this was December of 2024. There won't be data collected for that starting this next month, as we would normally have predicted. So you can draw your own conclusions about that, but it does seem to be that at a time when SNAP and other programs are really being challenged, where there's this really profound skepticism about these programs from the current administration, then at the same time, there is not going to be data collected to find out what are the impacts of those changes. So from a policy standpoint, then I would say that's why we've had those data, so that decision makers could look at it and say what's going on among which groups. And so if we don't have that data, it'll be harder to make wise decisions about that.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Clara. Yes.
I just want to step away. So, Ryan, can you talk specifically about your budget? Like what percent, I know you got a lot of money during COVID. So what percent's coming from the federal, what percent's coming from the state or local, and from donations? And what is your overall budget?
So during COVID, there was infusions of money for food banks to go out and purchase food, or there was money directly. So this was kind of interesting because so many restaurants had failed during COVID. The federal government was actually paying distributors, food distributors, to distribute that food to food banks. Currently, during this last food stamp issue with the delayed response, the state of Oregon stepped in with a $5 million emergency spend out for the food banks across the state. And that has helped because so much more of our inventory now is purchased food. That's one thing that has changed dramatically over the 28 years that I've been in food banking is early on, again, 28 years ago, it was primarily donations from either large corporations or local food drive and USDA. Those were the main sources of food. Now, about 40% or so is food purchase because those donations from large corporations have fallen off. And that's the only way that we can make up the difference. One of the advantages of the food purchasing program is that we can select more for that better nutrition at the food pantry. So the silver lining of that is that when I first started working at Food Share, the nutritional quality of what was being distributed was awful. It was just plain awful. It was beverages and snacks and that ultra high processed stuff. And now, because we have the budget to go out and purchase foods, not only shelf stable, but we spend quite a bit of money with local farms to contract so that we can introduce more of that fresh produce throughout the year into our pantry network. So overall, Food Share's budget, if you include the value of the food, is around $10 million. The actual cash amount is more like $1.5 million. But for that deal, you get about 5.5 to 6 million pounds of food distributed throughout the 2-county network. And we also, I think I do brag about this a little bit, just because we're one of the few food pantry or regional food banks that deliver to all of our network partners. So that means we're sending a truck every single week to Alsea, to Blodgett, to Monroe, Corvallis, Sweet Home, Jefferson, all those points in between, so that, again, getting back to the volunteerism, so that those volunteers can stay at the pantry versus driving back and forth between our warehouse. And so it's much appreciated that way. But yeah, the trajectory of finding enough food is a worrisome one going forward, because related to the food stamp issue is that H.R. 1, the big beautiful bill, will require more money from the state on administration. So that, like this $5 million for the food bank, in subsequent years, the state budget is going to be under tremendous pressure just to maintain food stamps where they are. And where that leaves then food banks to make up that difference is a real question.
Are you getting any federal money now?
The federal money comes primarily through USDA commodity support. So that's what came out of the 1980s, way back when, the cheese and dairy products. So that has maintained about where it's been for the last 10 years. Unfortunately, in the spring of this year, USDA cut programs that are funding for direct food purchase, primarily produce, to food banks. For us, it meant about 80,000 pounds worth of fresh produce was eliminated in March through June of this year. That program has not come back, so we've had to make up the difference with just local donations. And we'll see if there's nothing on the horizon to increase USDA commodity support. But, it's a strange mix of USDA commodities have always been to support industry, not for the food banks. So that's one of the key components of, well, there might be some farmers here and there in different crops that require some bailouts, and that might eventually make its way to the food bank world. But that's how it's always worked.
Are you getting any local government money from Lynn and Benton counties?
So both counties have consistently supported food share for decades. It's not a tremendous amount, but it's all part of the mix that happens. For our budget, and this has been the case for certainly the last 20 years, about 70% of all of our funding comes from local donations. So people giving $25 here, $50 there. It shows the compassion that this community has for all of our neighbors, and that we've relied on it. It's given us tremendous opportunity. We also keep our staffing very low for food share. So we have 8 FTE. Other regional food banks have exponentially more staff than that. But we've also, because we've had that staffing low, we rely on our pantry network to a tremendous degree. And I can't speak well enough about the volunteers at the local pantry, at the meal sites now, but especially during COVID. COVID was just a different level of commitment that I saw from the volunteers. They were quite literally risking their lives to continue to volunteer at the pantries. And that will always stay with me throughout the rest of my life. No matter what I do after this, the commitment that they had to make sure that their neighbors were fed during COVID was just a high point in that sense. It's unfortunate that it came about, but at the same time, to see that people cared that much to risk their lives to do it was a phenomenal experience.
So just to clarify, you said that about 75% of your budget is just local donations of money.
Correct, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Of course, food prices have gone up.
Yep. Yes.
If I may, that's a fabulous reason to contribute to Lynn Benton Food Share's active fundraiser, part of why we're here. And also, that was a tremendous question. Thank you for contributing. I think we have time for one more question. A cornerstone of the Food as Medicine series is myth busting. And I'm very glad to see that we got a myth busting question. And it's a very good one, I think, to end on as well, being that we live in the age of disinformation. What's an example of disinformation about food insecurity you hear often, and how do you debunk it and reframe it? Stumped. I like it.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. What's an example of disinformation about food insecurity you hear often, and how do you debunk it and reframe it?
Well, I'll jump in. Something that came up recently with a colleague is SNAP participation and thinking that perpetuates someone being in need, right? Rather than thinking about SNAP as a way to lift up. I mean, if you look at the research and evidence, it lifts people up out of poverty. And actually, I reached out to Mark to help me understand a SNAP participant and the length on the program. Is it cyclical, do they stay on it for years? And the research doesn't back it up. The data does not back that up, that they're on it for generations, or it keeps people, in poverty. It lifts people up out of poverty. It's a very, Mark can say more of the data that he shared, but really people stay on a short period of time. It meets a need. And so sometimes I think I've found in my work that people have the impression that low-income families just need to work harder to get their needs met. I've had people say, oh, food preservation, because I'm part of Extension, right? Food preservation's the answer. It's one answer, it's not the answer, right? Growing your own food, that's the answer. They just need to grow their own food and preserve it. right? These are options, but sometimes I feel like we put an unrealistic expectation on low-income families that they just need to work harder, and they're in their own circumstances based on individual decisions. So bringing it back to how we started this really is a political decision, political will, and how we invest our community funds.
Yeah, I'll just going off of that, I'll just hammer home again. I think that it was the first thing I said, but yeah, it's not a matter of scarcity, and it won't be for a long time. You know, I think a lot of people justify all sorts of things within our food system by saying like, oh well, you know, there's going to be 9 billion people in the world. What else are we going to do? We're not at that point yet where we have to ask those tough questions. And it really, I mean, how stark a reminder do we need than, you know, the same week that SNAP benefits were going to run out? You know, like the government shuts down, SNAP benefits stop going out to people, and we're still like building a ballroom, like rebuilding the White House, and weapon shipments never stopped, you know? So it's really just a question of priorities, and we have plenty to take care of ourselves.
If I may, I will not perpetuate misinformation, but to my understanding, and I would really appreciate confirmation on this, the average SNAP participant is enrolled for less than a year. It's like 75% of participants in SNAP generally only receive benefits for a pretty transitionary period of time. Is that accurate?
Yes, Tina mentioned this, that people tend to be on there for what we'd call a short spell, right? A few months, and then for a variety of reasons. They got a job, there's a change in the status, you know, someone in the house that was qualified now has left, now the house isn't qualified, so there's a lot of things that change in the lives of people that cause them to depart from SNAP. Some do have to return later if life is hard again, but it's a relatively small fraction for whom it's sort of a quote-unquote lifestyle. The one group that actually has pretty consistent participation once they are on is seniors. So if we can get seniors to sign up, and then they tend to stay on longer. Part of that is because our state agencies don't require them to keep coming back to prove every 6 months that they're still eligible. So yeah, there's a lot of moving in and out of the program, really, as I would say, one might hope for, right? Because if that is part of the point, is to help people through a period until they're on their feet, more able to work and provide for their families, then that's fine. I would add also, in terms of misinformation that I try to debunk, is just it's really easy to pile on to assume that state agencies and bureaucracies are always broken and always do a bad job. And in the state of Oregon, our Department of Human Services does a pretty darn good job with the coordination with lots of nonprofits around the state of getting people signed up who are eligible. So compared to most other states, we always are in the top 2 or 3 in terms of getting people to participate. We achieve almost 100% by some people's metrics. It's probably more than 95%. But people who are qualified are getting access to the program, and so I think there's sometimes reason to say, good job, you did your job. People who were eligible were told about it. We helped them apply for it, helped them get on as much as we could, help people stay on when they still needed it. And so it's nice sometimes to find that things work, sometimes as they should.
Well,
one thing.
Yeah, sure, please.
Just simply that SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, right? It's by design not meant to feed you entirely. So the idea that people are like free riding or fattening up on government assistance has always been ridiculous.
That's a great way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us in person. And then thank you for anybody on the live stream that joined. That's about it for what we have for you this evening. I am going to plug the Moore Family Center for Whole Grain Foods, Nutrition, and Preventive Health, and make sure that people leave here with the resources you need to very easily contribute to Lynn Benton Food Share's active fundraiser, and learn more about the center, the work that we do, and more and future Food as Medicine series episodes. So if you may, please, quick round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very, very, very much. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.